we've already talked about cellular respiration. Remember, cellular respiration happens in the presence of oxygen. But what happens if there's no oxygen available for cellular respiration? Now, believe it or not, things still happen. So the process of cellular respiration happens just without oxygen. However, we call it something else. We don't actually call it cellular respiration. This is something we call anaerobic respiration. So the process of cellular respiration is aerobic, meaning it's with oxygen. Anaerobic respiration happens without oxygen. So this is the release of a relatively small amount of energy by the breakdown of food substances in the absence of oxygen. Now, the anaerobic pathway that follows glycolysis is known as fermentation. So remember, the very first step of cellular respiration was glycolysis, and that happens with or without oxygen. So once glycolysis takes place, if it happens without oxygen, then it goes into a process known as fermentation. So fermentation occurs in the cytoplasm and will regenerate the cell's supply of NAD plus, which is, if you want to say, it's a kind of a carrier of energy, but not really. But it does produce a small amount of ATP. So in this picture over here on this particular side, this is the process of fermentation. On the other videos, we were talking about this side, which happens in the mitochondria. Fermentation happens only in the cytoplasm. So with that pyruvate that gets made from the glycolysis, in the absence of oxygen, actually goes through fermentation, in which some of those NAD pluses, NADH, it's a replenishment system here, and in the end, we do get a small amount of ATP. Now, there are two types of fermentation. We have lactic acid fermentation as being one, and then in the second one, we're going to talk about alcohol fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation, however, is the process that happens in you. So in humans, we actually go through lactic acid fermentation when energy supplies are scarce. And there are plenty of times where this happens inside of our own bodies. So lactic acid fermentation happens, let's say, if you have just run a sprint, or if you have run a marathon, or you do some sort of activity. And it's hard to supply oxygen to your muscles in specific places if you have long-term energy, or if you're using long-term energy, or really hard energy. This is one of the reasons why you get cramps, is because of a toxic chemical called lactic acid. Now, lactic acid is produced in the muscle cells, and it's transferred to the liver, where it's converted back into pyruvic acid. So this lactic acid that we see right here, it's produced in muscle cells, but the liver can change it back to pyruvic acid. Now, the lactic acid buildup will result in muscle fatigue. So this is one of the reasons why you feel crampage, or you might just kind of be tired. Lactic acid isn't something that we really like. So once it goes to the liver, and it eventually goes into the bloodstream, it's going to be carried to the liver, it's going to get rid of it, so your body can get rid of it. However, it really is a toxic substance to us. Now, while we're not going into the specifics of lactic acid fermentation, do note that in the top right-hand corner, this is sort of the process of it. So small amounts of ATP are produced. And when I say small, I mean very small. Your body uses it up, but your body uses it in order to kind of replenish some of the energy sources that have been used in your activity. So we also get this lactic acid over here, or lactate. We get this product also being made. So we have pyruvate, we have being used, we have ATP being created. So in the end, we are getting some energy out of this, but it really isn't an efficient way to get our energy, because we do have that lactic acid buildup. The second type of fermentation is called alcohol fermentation. Now, this is typically used by yeast or some other bacteria, and it's going to produce carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol. This is the process that actually creates alcohol. So the alcohol that the beer or the wine, also bread products are used by this particular method. So in this case, we take advantage of this process to make some of the things that we use. Maybe not every day, but occasionally. The carbon dioxide that is released from this process helps bread rise. So when you add yeast to bread, that carbon dioxide makes that nice fluffiness of the bread. If you have bread that does not rise, that's matzah. The ethanol, which is an alcohol, this is the type of thing that makes your beverages alcoholic. So your beer and your wine is actually has ethanol in it. So up on the top right-hand corner, this is the process of fermentation or alcohol fermentation. It looks similar to what we just saw with the lactic acid fermentation. We have the glucose coming in. If you notice on the right-hand side of your picture, you have pyruvate and other things being created, basically your ethyl alcohols and your carbon dioxide. And we also have ethanol. This is your product, your byproduct, of course, that makes your beverages alcoholic. So with these two methods of fermentation, do note that some energy, notice the energy up here, is being created by these particular processes, but it really isn't enough to fuel a lot of the things that we need on a daily basis. This is really a quick way to get energy, but it is not efficient for us. Now, do know that the difference between aerobic and anaerobic, of course, there's many ways, but do know that only 2 ATP is produced in anaerobic respiration. So only 2 is produced. That's not a whole lot of energy. 36 ATP are produced in aerobic respiration. So this really is, aerobic respiration really is your day-to-day loveliness. You really want aerobic respiration. We work best with oxygen. That's just the kind of beast we are. However, in situations that require you to get some sort of energy, anaerobic respiration is available for you. So you do get small bursts of energy that way as well.